Jocko, what is the biggest turnaround on stance/opinion you've ever made?
Now, this is one of those questions that I sat there and thought about it for a while. And then I realized that the answer was sitting right in front of my face, literally sitting right in front of my face. And that is this. Mm-hmm. It's the podcast, the book, the social media, all of it. Because I've talked about this before. I was raised in the SEAL teams to be the quiet professional. And as a matter of fact, one of my favorite SEALs when I was a young guy at Team 1, this guy was just a total badass frogman. And I learned a ton from him. And he was actually, some people say, oh, that guy's good at everything. This guy was actually awesome at everything. Like everything that there was to do, at shooting, at fighting, at climbing, at tactics. Everything that he did, he was awesome at. And he was super hardcore, just tough. And in fact, one of the stories about him is that when he joined the Navy and he had to come to boot camp, I guess in San Diego, he paddled a kayak from where he lived to get to San Diego. Mm-hmm. And he was 17 years old, by the way. He was just a 17-year-old kid, joined the Navy when he was 17, and then had no way of getting here. So take a kayak, put it in the water, and paddle to San Diego. I don't know. That seems to be the smart way to do things.
Sure.
And so back in the day, he had a hat. And he had this hat. And this is before you see SEAL memorabilia everywhere. You just see it, all over the place. He had this hat with just a trident on it. Nothing else, just a trident. And then under the trident, it just said the words, the silent option. And I always thought to myself, yes, that is it right there. That's us, right? The silent option. No fanfare, no news, no parade, no fame or fortune or glory of any kind. No, none of that. The silent option. That's it. And pretty much everybody that I looked up to in the SEAL teams had that kind of attitude. And there's something that is obviously so pure about that attitude. So selfless. That none of what you did as a SEAL was ever for any kind of recognition, ever. And that to me was sort of the code. Now, there were people that stepped out from that code. And while it certainly wasn't encouraged, it wasn't really ridiculed either. I mean, people did it. People wrote books. And it wasn't looked that down upon at the time, unless you were a bad team guy. If you were a bad SEAL, or if you were a guy that had a bad reputation, you would be crushed in the SEAL teams, amongst the team guys in the community. Now, civilians, they don't know the difference, right? To civilians, how can they tell? A SEAL is a SEAL is a SEAL, so they're good with it. But in the teams, if you had a bad reputation, your reputation would get even worse if you broke the code. So when I retired, I had zero intention of going public, right? Of becoming this. And then when I started working with civilian companies, and Leif and I formed a company, Echelon Front, and we realized pretty quickly that there was a big need for people to learn what we had to teach. And really quickly, the demand for us to write this down and be able to give it to people grew, and it was really obvious to us. So when that started, and we wrote it down, and then that started to transform. This idea of what we had written down started transforming into becoming a book, like a legitimate book. I got really nervous and scared and kind of almost sick, right? I was definitely very weary about it. And I think I did some little self-sabotage along the way, just a little bit here or there. I don't know, this is probably not going to, I think I did some of that stuff. I'd have to think about it. In fact, I know I did some of it because it's kind of an all or nothing proposition, right? You're either do it or you don't do it. And I guess you could try and use like a pseudonym, but then that's not me, right? I'm not going to make up a personality, right? And not be me, right? So that wasn't really an option. And furthermore, I knew that doesn't really last either. I mean, the pseudonyms, eventually people figure out who they are, and so that's the way it works. And I think the thing that finally made me say, okay, I'm going to do this, is that as I decided, like, okay, I'm going to do this, I just kind of knew I wasn't going to be anything else other than what I was, right? I'm not going to try and put on some persona or be something that I'm not. I'm just going to be me. And I've got, that's what I'm going to do. And so that's what I did. The me that is here is just me. There's nothing special. That's just who I am. And that's all I did, was basically expose what I am to, people in the public. Now, the thing is, now that I actually am out there a little bit and people can kind of see me in the world, right? There's definitely some things that I don't like about it. Or I shouldn't say I don't like them. There's some challenges, right? There's some challenges there. For instance, you're being watched all the time. You're being followed and you're being judged. And those things right there are coincidentally the exact same kind of challenges you face when you're in a leadership position that I faced when I was in a leadership position. Oh, people are watching me. Oh, people are judging me. I'm used to that. That's what it was like when I was in the SEAL teams. And just like when I was in the SEAL teams, I always tried to stay true to what I believed in and what I believed was right. And not to say I never made mistakes. I obviously did. But I always gave it my all to do the best job I could do and to take care of my guys, my brothers, and my friends. That's what I always tried to do. And really, that's all I'm still trying to do, is just to give something back, to pass on some of the little things that I learned along the way. And really, when I get the feedback from my SEAL teammates, from guys that are still active duty in the SEAL teams, from soldiers and Marines that are retired, or guys that are still on active duty, or guys that transition to the civilian world, all those guys from the front lines that are on the front lines right now. And then guys that are law enforcement and firefighters. And when that whole crew, that whole group of people send me some kind of thanks, it's awesome. And in addition to them, and I don't know if this is surprising or not, but I hear from just everyday normal people too, civilians, right? Businessmen, laborers, entrepreneurs, builders, mechanics, plumbers, electricians, software engineers, doctors, men and women, girls and boys, young and old, just every imaginable size, shape, color of person from every walk of life. And I hear from them. And when I hear from them and I see that they're getting something out of this, that makes those little challenges of judgment and scrutiny, it makes all those worthwhile to me. Because once again, I feel like I'm part of something that's bigger than me, bigger than myself, something more powerful than I could ever be by myself, something stronger than I could ever be alone. And for me to be doing what I can do to help that, and to have trying to help be both the task and the reward. It's a reward to help people. That to me has made it worthwhile.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, okay, the silent professional.
Mm-hmm. The quiet professional.
Yeah.
And the silent option.
Yeah.
Two different variations on the
thing.
same theme.
Is that because if that wasn't there, I would imagine you'd get a bunch of, hey, look at me, I was such a badass, and all these stories, and because I think that like what you and Leif have, and even this podcast and stuff, sure, there's like references to war, but it's not about like, ooh, let me spin all the cool tales that the war that I went through and stuff like that. It's more about like the actual principles of leadership and what can be effective, Even though I know the general public would probably want to hear every last cool story on how you saved this person or, killed all these bad guys or whatever, everyone will want to hear that. I would want to hear that. But that's not what it's about. That's not like what you're going public with, It's more about like, okay, this valuable stuff that is tried, tested in basically the harshest of conditions, that work everywhere. And like, that's the valuable part. I don't even know if that's even like seeking glory in any way.
Well, again, I've said this before. You can say that you're not trying to seek glory, but then when you write a 300-page book about yourself, you know what I mean? And then you have a podcast about yourself. It's like it just is what it is. Like there's no that has a level of self-centeredness that you can't. I mean, you can't avoid. I can't deny. Right? I can't deny. Like I actually know the podcast is it's a podcast and I talk on it for 2 hours. Right? That's me talking. Right? Yeah. So there is a level of that you can't escape from. And I don't know if I talked about this before, but that book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which maybe I'll do, but it's about the hippies and the drug revolution. And well, this one part of it where this guy is listening there. He's up in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, and he goes on this tangent about how what they're saying is me, right. me, look at me. Mm. And when I read that for the first time, I was like, oh, I never want to be that person that's saying that. Yeah. And that's that. But again, the dichotomy here is I have a podcast, I have a book, and the book is me, and the podcast, me. And so it's unavoidable to have a podcast that you talk on and not have it somehow be about you. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. So that's a real challenge, and I do my best to mitigate that. Right. But you can't stop it. It is factually a podcast that I'm in. It is factually a book that I wrote. Right. It's a book that factually Leif wrote. So that's just what it is. Yeah. And so you can't take those away. The only thing that mitigates that feeling from me is, again, what I just said, is when I got soldiers, Marine, when I got SEAL teammates of mine that are fired up, and they're saying, hey, that was awesome. Thanks for that one. This was great. I never knew that, or whatever they're going to say. Yeah. Right. And then on top of that, you get civilians that are saying, hey, I stopped using drugs because of your podcast. That is awesome. Yeah. I don't like drugs. And so when somebody tells me that they stopped using drugs because of the podcast, that makes me feel very gratified. When somebody calls me up, I just had somebody on Twitter just said, a guy's like 53 years old. And he said, hey, I've lost X amount of pounds, 40 something pounds. And he said, I just did the first legit pull-up of my life. 53 years old. Yeah. 53 years old, just did the first legitimate pull-up of his life. He's like, thank you. Yeah. That is worth the daggers that stick me in my brain, because I know I sold out. Yeah. Right? I sold out. But that's what it is.
Is it just in your? I mean, do you get like scrutiny from people at all for quote unquote selling out, or is it?
Not
or
really.
Do you think?
My bros in the teams are fire. They're
right. Yeah. That's what I would think, and it is because the whole dynamic. I mean, you gotta be like Jocko Podcast. It's called Jocko Podcast. It's about me. You kind of have to do that. I mean, there's a small element of that you have to include about yourself.
Yeah,
for credibility reasons, all this stuff. But then aside from that, it's valuable stuff. It's not glory seeking stuff at all. This is like stuff that's helpful. Yeah. It'll help, like the stuff that you can benefit from this podcast, from the book. If the people in your neighborhood all incorporated these principles into their life, it'd be a better neighborhood. So it's not like, I'm just this, look at me, I'm a warrior. It's not that.
No.
So it makes it worth it. I mean, I dig it though, that like tradition, let's just say if there's like a person who's like, hey, hey, I dig what you're doing, but you shouldn't do that. That's the code. That's the tradition. That's the code you sold out. I would understand that, but I think that's just like, you're not looking at the big picture.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely was. When I hear from active duty military, when I hear from my SEAL bros that are telling me this is awesome, that makes it worthwhile to me, and that's sort of why I keep doing it. That, and again, these civilian folks that are out there that are just changing their lives, and again, whenever they say, "Oh, thank you," I say, "I didn't do anything. You did it." That guy that did his first pull-up. His first legit pull-up in 53 years of life. You know what? That's awesome. I didn't do that pull-up. He did it. He had to put all the work in. All he did was change his attitude and get in the game. And now he's, having a much better situation in his life. Because your life is better. If you go from 0 pull-ups to 1, your life just got better. Your life just got a lot better, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was interesting as I sat here and talked about when I thought about the question, the biggest turnaround. I've been really pretty steady in my beliefs for a long time. I mean,
about this, you mean?
No, just in general. In general, if you were to interview me now and you interviewed me 10 years ago, they'd be close. I was probably a little bit dumber 10 years ago. I was dumber 6 months ago. But my broad beliefs would be somewhat similar, right?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, okay, what's the biggest turnaround? And then I realized, oh yeah, obviously this is a huge turnaround for me. Yeah. And there were guys that, when guys in the SEAL teams found out that I had a book coming out, there was definitely some guys that were like, dude, what are you doing? And I was, and then they'd read it and say, hey man, credit. Yeah. It's cool. All good, and that's the way it is.
Let's say you were to not rewind life, but take the Jocko from before Ramadi. How about that? Mm-hmm. Jocko and then the idea was introduced. Hey, what did you feel about that? Like if someone went and wrote a book and did a podcast or something, like what was your take?
Well, there was no podcast back then, but generally negative. Yeah. That's why it's a big turnaround.
Right.
Because if you told me that years ago, I'd be like, oh, we're quiet professionals. We don't do that kind of thing. Yeah. So here I am, Mr. Quiet Professional.
Yeah. Not so quiet.
Not so quiet.
Still a professional though.
Trying to keep it professional. Definitely trying to keep it professional.
Yeah, man, it's good. Yeah, is there how like some people who change their attitude on things all the time sometimes get frowned upon. This is just in general for being like a flip-flopper or something. Yeah. You see it in like politics and stuff. But isn't that kind of good if your ideas about things always are updated?
Yeah, it's okay with me. I don't mind it. I don't mind if people change their opinion over time as they bring on new knowledge. But there's a point where that becomes ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. Well, it kind of depends on why they're changing their mind.
Yeah, that's true too.
So if it's like with the introduction of new facts and stuff like that, then they're like, okay, I didn't know all that. Now, it paints a broader, more accurate picture. So now I feel this way, or starting to feel this way about it. But there's a bias, talk about cognitive bias I think it's called backfire effect. Mm-hmm. And it's the opposite. So like new factual information will come in, and the tendency is to dig deeper into your current belief.
Oh, for sure. In fact, I can talk about that. I've seen that happen before. And when I've seen that happen is people, the way that they first learn to do something in the SEAL teams is the way they believe is correct. Right. And you have to beat it out of them. As we learn new tactics, wherever some guy went to their first training at a SEAL team, wherever they went and whoever taught them, that's sort of what they believe. Yeah. And anyone else that comes in with a new idea will be, oh, yeah, man, you don't know what this. No, that's not the best way. Yeah. And so, I figured that out real quick when I was in training. when I was running training, and I realized, I got to get over this barrier of, this guy learned it at this team or wherever, or he learned it from this guy, and so he's got to have that in his head that's the only way to do things. Cool, just gotta. I wouldn't aggressively attack it, of course. I'd say, oh yeah, that's a great tactic what they do. Yeah, and you know what we're about to show you actually mixes in with that tactic good. You might want to, it's something you could use along with your tactic, and then they'd realize that the tactic we're teaching is superior. Yeah. Because we've evolved, right? I had to evolve. We learned new tactics all the time. The fundamental principles didn't change, but the execution at a tactical level would change because we got better.
Updated,
Yeah, well, it's called war. We went to war. And as soon as we went to war, we started figuring out some of the stuff that we had been taught didn't really function the way it was literally like pre-UFC martial arts.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right?
Yeah.
Pre-UFC martial arts, if you learn that, if I touch your neck in this particular manner, you're going to fall down and nothing is going to save you from that. Yeah. And if you get taught that, you might believe it.
Yeah.
And then somebody punches you in the face.
I know.
Or does a double leg takedown on you and slams you into the ground.
Yeah, when you try to hit their neck or something.
Yeah, when you try and karate chop their neck. So it was the same thing in the SEAL teams. We had tactics that had evolved during a peacetime environment in a bubble. And so when the war started, we said, ooh, okay, we need to do an immediate check on all these things.
Yeah. My friend was in from out of town this past weekend. We watched the fights, and the guys were in this specific position, standing kind of from the back there. And he asked, he's like, "Hey, couldn't he just like throw knees and give him like the meanest Charlie horse right there?" And then we were like, it's not. We don't say it's not condescending or anything, but if you don't know, you don't know. Yeah, it's like. So we said. No, I mean, yeah, you could, but that wouldn't do anything. I mean, I don't think you even feel that,
No, not during a fight. Not during a UFC fight.
So how I put it was, I said, Charlie horses are for when you're cruising and you see your friend, you're like, oh, give my friend a Charlie horse, and you do it, and it like hurts him. He's like, oh, but no, when you're in fighting, like, you don't really feel a Charlie horse.
Now, that being said, if you're in a position and somebody starts dropping 12 to 6 elbows onto your thigh,
and they're big enough.
And they're big, and you're kind of stuck there. You'll feel those. After and you'll see a guy, even in the UFC, you'll see a guy make adjustments and move because he doesn't want to take 12 of those shots. That's not going to be fun.
Yeah, my example was a leg kick. So a leg kick is essentially can be like a Charlie horse. You know how you give your friend a Charlie horse?
Really gnarly Charlie horse.
Exactly right. And that's the point.
Yeah.
The point is like what you would think is a common Charlie horse, like with your friend or at school or whatever, like like an elbow where you punch it or even you knee it or whatever, is different than like the kind of Charlie horse that will be effective in.
Yeah, but in a fight, in an MMA, it takes even 99% of the time with leg kicks, it does take multiple. It takes rounds worth of leg kicks before you can actually affect the guy. It might slow the guy down a little bit. He's a little less apt to have weight on that front leg or whatever. But then, you see, there's been fights that have ended because third or fourth round, the guy's been kicked in the leg 47 times, and it's just easy. He breaks.
Yeah. It's just again, just one of those things. Like if you don't know, you don't know. You think true. That's how it is, and then get updated information.
Yeah, there's much in the world that looks like that. That if you don't know, it seems like it'd be easy.
Yeah. And
it's not easy. And jiu-jitsu is a classic, or MMA is a classic example of that. But there's so many things. I mean, even a normal sport, baseball.
Yep.
Hey, how hard can it be to hit that ball?
All sports, actually.
Yeah, all sports. Rock climbing. You look and say, dude, why don't you just grab that thing right there?
Yeah,
no.
Just hold on.
Yeah, just hold on. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Football, like, when they drop the ball, it's like, oh my gosh, you couldn't even catch that ball right in his hands. Okay, so Trey, you're a football now. Of course, they're trained to understand, but that's kind of part of the point. Them being trained made it look like it's so easy. You've seen it done all those times.
And what's interesting is when this transfers over into the interpersonal and the leadership realm.
Yeah.
And it's the same exact thing where if you don't know, you don't know. And you see people that are, younger leaders, or they're not very experienced, and they'll be making the same kind of rookie mistakes or have the same kind of opinion of, well, hey, why don't we just tell them to do this? Oh, it's very easy. Why you can't tell them to do that? You just tell them to do that, they're just not going to listen to you because they don't have respect for you because you don't have a relationship with you and you haven't built anything up yet. So you can end up with the same thing in that aspect of life as you do in a war fighting aspect of life, as you do in a sports aspect of life. It's all the same.
Yeah. Huh.
You got to learn the skills. You got to practice the skills.
Yeah, it's true. Even like shooting a gun.
Yeah. Oh, super easy, right?
Yeah.
Let's see somebody knock out. You know, it's a skill. I mean, it's easier. It's obviously easier to kill someone with a gun than it is with a knife or with your bare hands. It's an easier method, but yeah, you see this all the time. You see little gunfights where people shoot 20, 25 rounds at another guy and they don't hit him. Yeah. And they're only 10 feet away, you know? So shooting is easier, but it still is a skill that you need to practice.
I know, man. And that's not to mention just all the like input they like just firing it. You know, like on movies, the guy will be like one hand, whatever. Boom, 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 boom. A more accurate representation of how it would go is like, the kind of movies where the girl, they just totally demean women a lot of the times when the girl grabs the gun and she's like, and she shoots it and then like it flies out of her hand.
Oh yeah.
That's probably pretty accurate if you never shot a gun.
Well, yeah, if someone's never shot a gun before.
Yeah.
The first time I ever took my wife to a range to teach her shooting, and she was kind of that way, kind of scared and intimidated, and she was kind of almost shaking a little bit. And a half an hour later, I had her doing quick draws from the holster, gunning down targets. I said, yeah, you're over it now, aren't you? She says, shut up and reload my magazine. I'm like, okay, cool. We got this.
Yeah. You ever seen those videos online? I mean, I don't know how much time you spend watching videos online, but they're more just for entertainment. But of people like shooting like big guns at it. Like,
and it hits them.
It hits them in the face and stuff.
Yeah, those are good. Yeah, if I'm going to spend time watching videos, I'm watching actually guys that are good, that have some knowledge to put out on shooting.
Right. Stuff you can learn.
Gotcha. So check. Although you can learn from watching somebody get hit in the face with a shotgun when they shoot it wrong. All right, awesome.